Welcome to another edition of Exotic Gardening UK. The weather has been absolutely fantastic. Really warm, 23, 24 degrees, sunshine all day long and hardly a breeze at all. And it's September now, so we need to start thinking about what we're going to do with all the plants we have, all the tender plants and the half-hardy plants. How do we deal with them over winter? We've started to have a few cool nights. We've had a few 2 or 3 nights down to 4 or 5 degrees, which is getting cold for the very tender plants. So what I've done is I've done a chart listing all the commonly grown tender and half-hardy plants, and then I've done sort of month by month what to do with those plants. So in this video we're going to go through that chart and discuss what plants need to happen over winter, what to do with them and when to do it. If you like my videos, please subscribe using the button below. And right, we'll get straight on to it. So when it comes to the bananas, the Musa Baju, this doesn't always need protecting at all. It's still half hardy because in bad winters or in colder areas it will get cut to the ground. The roots would come back up. But if I am going to protect this plant with either straw or lots of fleece, then I'll start doing this probably mid to late October. It would need to remain in situ to sort of end of February, and then it can be unwrapped in March, providing that it's not really cold in March. If it is, then probably leave it till early April. If you look at Musa Sycamensis, this is probably more tender in most cases. It is quite variable, so some people do find this as hardy as Baju, but in most cases it's not as hardy, so it does need protecting. So you can protect this at the same time as Baju, so when the first frosts have come and damaged the leaves, sort of mid to late October. But if you want to be on the safe side, you can dig it up as well, keep it in the greenhouse or keep it frost free in a connected garage or something like that, so either in a cellar, and that needs to be done so late October, early November. And again, this can be brought out into growth. If you do that, you need to bring it into growth, into the greenhouse or a house, sort of February, March time, and then plant it out once you've hardened it off, sort of in early May. Musa Cavendish, this is a banana you see sold lots of places. It's not hardy in the slightest. This is the one with the maroon blotches on the leaves. So this needs to be dug up really before it gets cold. So below 5-6 degrees it won't be happy at all. So I'll be digging it up now really in September. If not, you might get it through to October, but definitely by mid-October get this dug up and brought into the house, conservatory, heated greenhouse, somewhere it's going to be kept above 15 degrees really to keep it growing well and in plenty of light. And again, this can be planted out in May, June time when it's been hardened off. On set, this is not hardy. If you planted 100 of these, went through 100 winters, then you'll get a few that would survive all winter, but it's not very common it's going to do so, because it basically rots even if it's not too cold with the moisture over winter, and will rot in spring. So the best course of action is to dig this up and deal with it in several ways that I've covered in my other videos, either dry storing or keep going in a conservatory or heated greenhouse or in the house. And this needs to be done around the time of the first proper frost, which could be mid-October, could be early November. It needs to be dug up and dealt with and then hardened off in spring and planted out a little bit earlier than some other plants that could be planted out in April, May time, or May, June time at the latest. So in Stormen and Iricine and Plectranthus, these are tender, very tender plants. So these you can take cuttings of in sort of late summer, early autumn, before any frost at all. Get these plants. So I'll be taking these cuttings of these plants in September, and then keep the cuttings in the house or greenhouse or in a heater propagator all winter, and then either propagate from those in spring or plant out the cuttings. That'll be decent sized plants by spring in May, June time in their final planting positions. Cycas, this is half hard. It's not a completely hardy plant in most of the UK. This can be, if it's in a pot, obviously brought in. Doesn't need light, so you can bring it into a dark garage and it'll be fine as long as it's frost free. Or if you're leaving it in the ground, you need to start protecting it after the first sort of decent frosts arrive in late October. And you need to wrap this with loads and loads and loads of fleece if you want to make sure it gets through with its leaves. You can do minimal protection or no protection. The centre of the plant will probably survive, but then the leaves will probably die off in most winters unless it's very mild. So it's best to protect this with loads and loads of fleece. It doesn't mind being wrapped up and being dark for months on a time. It copes well with that, unlike a lot of other plants. And then it can be unwrapped in April time. Dicksonia Antarctica, I've covered again this in several videos of protecting these. If you're going to protect these, you need to really wait till the first big frost, put straw in the top and protect it in situ. There's no point trying to dig these up unless you're going to get an extreme cold period of sub-zero for several weeks on end and -8 to -15. But most winters, this is a fine plant to just protect in situ. And you can unwrap this sort of in March, April time in spring, and then you'll see the new leaves unfurl sort of April, May time. Cyatheas, nearly all these are tender to half hardy, so you need to protect these in most of the UK. So I protect mine with a load of tyres and straw and a bit of plastic over the top. If not in the ground, then definitely bring this in to keep it frost free in winter, and then if it's in the ground, you can take off the protection again in April, May time. Agaves, depending on the species, they're varying levels of hardiness, but the most hardy ones you can get away with sort of just a rain shelter over the top of these, and you can do that sort of in sort of October time, late October. The real colds that will affect these won't really happen probably till the new year if you're going to get a really cold spell, but they don't want to be wet and cold, so you've got to keep them dry from sort of October onwards really, and then you can take the covers off in spring and April, May, or a bit earlier if you wish. Aloe polyphylla, very similar to the agave, so keep a rain shelter over this. It can get down to -8 to -10 when established, but it can be a little bit more temperamental and die, go to mush at not so low temperatures. You really need to keep this again on the dry side in winter. Colocasias, two types really. You've got the tender ones, which obviously you need to either propagate or dig up before any sign of frost and keep warm over winter. And the half-hardy ones, such as the pink china, you can just protect in situ, so you can just put some straw or compost over the top of the plants once the frost have killed all the foliage, and then take this mulch off in spring and let them just grow away in spring and summer. Cannas, dahlias, exactly the same sort of thing. You can either dig these up if you wish in sort of late October after the first killer frosts have killed the foliage, or you can leave in situ as I do because it's free draining ground. Sometimes I put a bit of straw over the top just to protect these, and again once you see growth in spring, you can take off the straw or mulch that you've used. Begonias, very similar as well. Most of these are half hardy. There are some very tender ones like the Rex ones, which you normally see as house plants that you do need to dig up really, but there's many half-hardy ones. Even ones that you sold as bedding begonias will get through most winters with a bit of protection, but you can dig them up obviously and keep the corms dryish over winter and then plant in spring. Hedychiums, so the gingers, the tender ones obviously need to dig up. The half-hardy ones again protect with straw, and Forestiae being probably the hardiest one that doesn't really need much protection. Again, wait for the first killer frost and then sort of protect from sort of early November onwards. Yuccas, again, most don't need protection, but the half-hardy ones, or the ones that don't want any moisture really in winter, start protecting from early November. Same with Daisylarions if you want to protect those, but most, to be honest, are totally fine without any protection. I've not protected my Daisylarions for years now, unless it's been very cold and put a bit of plastic sheeting over the top. Melianthus, definitely root hardy down to at least -8, but the foliage can die back in cold winters. In mild winters, it'll keep the framework of stems and most of the leaves. You can protect these with straw over the ground around the plants as well, to protect the roots and the new shoots coming through in spring. Amicia, very similar to Melianthus. You can take cuttings in autumn and then protect the crowns of these plants, and it'll come back down to -8, -10 again. Alocasias, nearly all are tender, so need to be dug up and kept warm over winter, or you can dry store the rhizomes. If you do leave them in the ground, you might find they do overwinter if you're lucky, but they're so slow to get going in spring. It's not really worth keeping them in the ground. It's much better to dig these up and get them growing in the heat of a propagator in a greenhouse and plant out in spring. Romancias, these can't take really much cold. You can get a frost on them to kill the foliage and the old wood will be fine, but repeated frost will kill these down to the ground or completely kill these. So the best thing to do is dig them up before the frosts have got to them, cut off most of the foliage, keep sort of the wooden framework of these, and then not dry store, but keep them just ticking over with just a bit of moisture in a cool but frost-free place, or you can keep them going sort of in a warmer greenhouse in the foliage and they'll grow as well, but you need decent light to do that. Caladiums, quite difficult really. They're very tender. They go back to like little bulbs, so you can dig these up, dry these off, but these need to be kept warm as well as dry, so you need to keep them in the house sort of like 18-20 degrees minimum, and then start them off in spring. Brea Amata, it's not bulletproof, but it can cope with cold temperatures provided it's not cold for too long. So -6 and lower, you might start damaging the leaves. You can put some protection over the top or wrap fleece for very short periods on snowy days or before it gets snowy or very cold. But you don't need to protect them if you're in a mild sort of coastal area. If you do wrap them up, then you need to unwrap them as soon as you can, and definitely by sort of March time, otherwise fungus and stuff will set into the plants, which you don't want. And Bootia's very, very similar. Don't really need any protection down to -6, -8. And if it gets cold, then yeah, put the fleece over these. The tender Trachycarpus, or the half-hardy Trachycarpus, so Latisectus and Machianus, protect these again when it gets down to -5 or lower. If it's got overhead cover from other plants, then it probably won't need any protection. But these are on the tender side, so try to give them a bit of protection of some sort if it's going to get to -5 or lower. -3, -4 can damage the leaves of Martianus. Arid plants, cacti, echeverias, etc. Again, these need to be dug up on the hole. Some will survive outside with protection or with overhead cover. As long as they're very dry over winter, they can come through. But better to be safe than sorry for most cacti and echeverias and actually dig them up. A few species have been noted as being hardy, so those, if you seek out, you can leave in the ground. We'll cover that in different videos. Aeoniums, again, they're not hardy. In a very mild winter, the odd plant will get through, but 9 times out of 10 they won't. So these need to be dug up before the first decent frost. So I dig them up sort of mid-October, late October, early November at the latest, really, in my garden, unless it's extremely mild autumn. Obviously, houseplants, you dig them up before it gets lower than 10 degrees or 8 degrees at night time for several days at a time, and cool day temperatures. So this is sort of, can be any time in September, but definitely by October you need to be digging up your houseplants, bringing them indoors. And then Gunnera manicata, hardy plant down to -10, but you can protect this, and you should protect this after the first frost. Sort of bend over the leaves, put them over the crowns of the plants, and that'll be enough protection to keep these going. And then in spring, it can be quite early as well, so in sort of
February, March time, get rid of all the leaves, the old leaves, and then the new leaves will unfurl sort of in April and spring. So that's a quick run through of most of the plants that are tender or half hardy and commonly grown. Hope that's helped a bit, and I'll be doing more videos next week. Thanks for watching.